The ballroom shimmered with gold chandeliers, designer gowns, and laughter that echoed through crystal glasses. It was the kind of place where power met privilege, and where some people forgot that money doesn't buy class. When Maya Thompson walked in, every head turned. She was elegant, calm, and confident, a woman whose quiet grace spoke louder than any introduction. Most of the guests didn't know her name, but they soon would. Because that night, the people laughing at her were about to learn they were mocking the very woman who held their future in her hands. A few cruel jokes, a condescending laugh, and one smug billionaire's wife turned a luxurious charity gala into a scene that would become a corporate legend. Before the night was over, the family that owned half the city would be begging for forgiveness from the woman whose $5 billion deal they had just thrown away with a single insult. The gala was held at the Carlton Estate, a sprawling mansion known for its exclusivity and the kind of crowd that believes status was measured in watch brands and last names. The hosts that evening were the Whitakers, an old money billionaire family with fingers in every industry from real estate to media. Maya Thompson had been invited as an honored guest. Her company, Thompson Global Innovations, was on the brink of finalizing a $5 billion merger with the Whitakers conglomerate. For months, both sides had been negotiating quietly, and everything was set for a smooth closing. This event was meant to celebrate that partnership, a symbolic evening before the formal signing. But not everyone in the room saw it that way. When Maya arrived, she was dressed in a sleek black gown, elegant, understated, and powerful in its simplicity. Her presence drew attention, but not the kind she deserved. From the corner of the ballroom, whispers began to circulate. "Who's she?" one guest murmured. "Investor, apparently," another replied. "I heard she runs some kind of tech company." A third voice laughed softly. "Must be diversity PR." Their words floated through the room, harmless to them, sharp to anyone listening. Maya caught pieces of it as she smiled and shook hands with executives she'd met dozens of times. Her composure never broke. Years in business had taught her how to read a room without reacting. Then came Evelyn Whitaker, the matriarch of the family. Impeccably dressed, diamonds glittering around her neck, she approached Maya with that kind of smile that never quite reached the eyes. "So, Maya," she said, her tone dripping with politeness, "lovely to finally meet you. I've heard so much about your company. You must be quite the hard worker." Maya smiled. "I'd like to think so. We've built a strong team." Evelyn's lips twitched. "Oh, I'm sure. It's refreshing to see more diversity in leadership these days." A few people nearby chuckled quietly, watching the exchange like a performance. Evelyn turned slightly toward her husband, Richard Whitaker, who stood by the bar with a glass of champagne. "Richard," she called out loudly, "this is the woman your firm's merging with. Isn't that just marvelous?" Richard raised his glass lazily and said with a smirk, "Of course, of course. It's good to see opportunity being distributed." A ripple of laughter followed. Maya's assistant, who stood a few feet away, tensed. He had seen this before, the microaggressions, the masked insults. But Maya, she didn't flinch. Her expression remained serene, even as another guest leaned in and said with a grin, "So, Maya, what do you really do? You must have one hell of a boss to be here tonight." That line drew the loudest laugh yet. Even Evelyn joined in, sipping her drink with a smirk. Maya simply tilted her head, smiled faintly, and said, "Yes, my boss can be demanding." She paused, her eyes steady. "Fortunately, she's also fair." It took a second before the meaning sank in. A few people exchanged puzzled glances, and then, slowly, realization began to dawn. Evelyn's smile faltered just slightly. But before anyone could recover, the family's eldest son, Brandon, approached the group. Young, arrogant, and emboldened by wine, he looked Maya up and down and said, "So, you're the tech lady, huh? My dad said you're smart. Guess we'll see how long that lasts after the ink dries."
The tone wasn't teasing. It was dismissive, patronizing in the way that came from never being told no. Maya's assistant took a step forward, but she stopped him with a gentle gesture. Her gaze remained fixed on Brandon. "Well," she said calmly, "I've learned that partnerships are built on respect. Without that, the ink doesn't mean much." Brandon smirked. Spoken like someone who's lucky to be in the room. That was it. The moment hung in the air, ugly, heavy, unmistakable. The laughter that had filled the space minutes earlier now felt out of place. A few guests shuffled uncomfortably, realizing the line had been crossed, but no one spoke up. Maya nodded once, collected, her poise unshaken. She glanced at her assistant. "I think that's enough introductions for tonight." Evelyn blinked, confused. "Leaving already? But we haven't even toasted to the deal." Maya smiled politely. "You're right, we haven't." And with that, she turned and walked out of the ballroom, heels clicking softly against marble, her head held high. The Whitakers watched her leave, whispering and laughing among themselves. "Well," Evelyn muttered, "some people just can't handle real society." But if she had looked closely, she might have noticed the calm, deliberate look on Maya's face as she left. Not one of embarrassment, but of quiet finality. Because Maya wasn't just walking away from a party, she was walking away from them. That night, when the Whitakers raised their glasses and celebrated what they believed was their soon-to-be acquisition, none of them knew that in less than 24 hours, every number in that $5 billion deal would turn to dust.
The next morning, while the Whitakers were still asleep in their mansion, blissfully unaware of the storm about to hit, Maya was sitting in her gloss-walled office overlooking downtown Manhattan. The early light streamed across her desk, illuminating the thick folder marked Whitaker Merger. Her assistant entered quietly, holding 2 coffees. "Rough night?" he asked. Maya smiled faintly. "Enlightening." She didn't rant, didn't complain. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything. She flipped open the folder, skimmed the pages that had once symbolized a partnership, and then closed it for the last time. "Cancel the meeting with their lawyers," she said calmly. Her assistant hesitated. "All of it? The merger?" Maya nodded. "All of it, effective immediately." He blinked. "That's $5 billion, Maya." She met his gaze, her voice even. $5 billion can't buy respect, and I don't build with people who laugh at me when they think I'm beneath them." He nodded slowly, realizing she meant every word. "I'll draft the termination notice." "Do that, and send a copy to every board member. I'll sign it myself." Within an hour, Thomson Global Innovations officially withdrew from the merger. The message was clear, concise, and mercilessly professional. Due to recent behavioral concerns and incompatibility with our corporate values, Thomson Global Innovations is terminating all partnership discussions with Whitaker Enterprises effective immediately. It hit the Whitakers' inboxes just as they were finishing brunch. Richard Whitaker read it twice before he processed the words. "What the hell does this mean?" he muttered. Evelyn leaned over his shoulder, frowning. "She can't just cancel. We had an agreement." Brandon, still half hungover, scoffed. "Probably a negotiation tactic. She'll call back." But Maya didn't call back. Instead, her legal team issued a formal statement to the press within hours, confirming the deal's cancellation and citing ethical misalignment and lack of professional integrity. The markets reacted instantly. Whitaker Enterprises stock plummeted 18% by noon. Investors panicked. Analysts speculated. Every major outlet began calling their PR office for a statement. By afternoon, the story had leaked, not from Maya's side, but from a witness at the gala who had seen everything. A viral post appeared online. At last night's Carlton Gala, the Whitakers mocked a black businesswoman, not realizing she was the CEO of the company they were merging with. Today, she canceled their $5 billion deal. Within hours, it had millions of views. The comments section exploded. "Poetic justice. Plays stupid games, lose billion-dollar deals. This is what grace under fire looks like." Evelyn tried to do damage control, calling the family's PR manager in a frenzy. "We'll deny everything," she snapped. "Say it's fake." But by then, photos from the gala had surfaced. including one of Maya standing gracefully near the bar while Evelyn and her friends laughed behind her. The optics were damning. By the next morning, #RespectMaya was trending globally. Media outlets hailed her as the woman who turned humiliation into empowerment. Business reporters dissected her decision as a masterclass in leadership and principle. Meanwhile, the Whitakers scrambled to contain the fallout. Richard called Maya's office repeatedly, but his calls were politely declined. When he finally managed to reach her through a mutual connection, she answered with her usual calm tone. "Richard," she said, "I was expecting your call." "Maya," he began, trying to sound composed. "This is a misunderstanding. My family can be playful, but there was no harm meant." "I'm sure there wasn't," she replied evenly. "But the harm was done anyway." He sighed. "Look, this deal means a lot for both our companies." "I agree. And that's why I wanted partners who understood value beyond numbers. I don't compromise on dignity, Richard. Not for 5 billion, not for 50. There was a long silence. He finally said, "You're making a mistake." She smiled faintly. "No, I'm correcting one." And with that, she ended the call. By that evening, news outlets confirmed that several of the Whitakers' existing investors had withdrawn. Their reputation, once untouchable, had become a liability. Behind closed doors, board members questioned Richard's leadership. The family's arrogance, once their trademark, now looked like ignorance. Meanwhile, Maya's company flourished. The decision not only boosted her credibility, but attracted new investors who respected her principles. Within weeks, Thomson Global secured 2 new contracts worth even more than the canceled deal, both with companies that publicly praised her integrity and strength under pressure.
Maya didn't boast. She didn't grant interviews or make grand statements. When asked by a journalist if she regretted walking away from such a massive deal, she said simply, "You can't build wealth with people who don't see your worth." Those words became a quote that business schools, leadership coaches, and motivational speakers repeated for years. As for the Whitakers, their empire never fully recovered. They remained wealthy, yes, but their influence dimmed. Invitations to elite circles grew fewer. Their name, once a symbol of power, became a quiet warning. Don't underestimate the person you mock. A year later, Maya attended another gala, not at the Carlton estate, but one hosted in her honor by Forbes. She was being recognized as Businesswoman of the Year. Cameras flashed, journalists swarmed, and industry leaders lined up to shake her hand. As she stood on stage accepting the award, her speech was brief. "I don't believe in revenge," she said softly, the crowd hanging on her every word. "I believe in self-respect. Last year, I walked away from something that didn't align with who I am. It cost billions, but it restored something far more valuable, my peace." The audience rose in applause. Later that night, as she stepped outside into the cool air, her assistant handed her a note. It was unsigned, but written on expensive stationery. "You taught us a lesson we'll never forget. E.W." Maya smiled. She didn't need to reply. Some lessons, she knew, spoke loudest through silence. And as her car pulled away, she looked back at the glowing city skyline, not with bitterness, but with quiet satisfaction. They had mocked her for being out of place in their world, but in the end, it was her world they had lost access to.
In the weeks that followed, the world kept talking about Maya Thompson. Business forums debated her decision, social media praised her composure, and across boardrooms and dinner tables, people whispered about how a single act of disrespect had cost one of the richest families in America $5 billion. But for Maya, life didn't change much. She still woke early, still read the news with her morning tea, still showed up to her office with quiet purpose. The storm outside never touched her peace. She wasn't interested in fame or applause. She didn't need validation from strangers. She had something better, self-respect. Her assistant often told her, People see you as this legend now. Maya would laugh softly. I'm just someone who refuses to let money excuse bad behavior. It wasn't anger that guided her. It was principle. For years, she'd fought to prove herself in rooms that weren't built to welcome women like her. Rooms where she was the only one who looked like her, where every achievement came with a side of doubt. She'd learned to move differently, speak carefully, and build a legacy that couldn't be taken from her. That night at the Whitaker's gala wasn't the first time she'd been underestimated, but it was the last time she allowed it to go unchecked. In private moments, she thought about her parents, both teachers who had raised her to work hard but to never tolerate disrespect. Her father used to say, "You don't need to fight every battle. Just pick the ones that remind people who you are." That memory made her smile now, because that night she hadn't shouted, hadn't demanded justice. She'd just shown them who she was, through action, not words. And that, she realized, had been the real power all along. The Whitakers faded quietly from the spotlight after the scandal. They released a carefully worded apology that most people saw right through. Their empires still stood, but it was cracked at the foundation, not financially, but reputationally. Invitations to major events dried up. Their names appeared less in society pages, and the people who once laughed at their jokes now avoided being associated with them. Maya didn't gloat. She didn't celebrate their fall. She simply kept building. Months later, she received an email from one of the Whitakers' former board members. He had left the company and wanted to thank her.
Your decision reminded a lot of us that character still matters. The money we lost wasn't the real cost, it was our integrity. I won't forget what you taught us. Maya read it twice, closed her laptop, and smiled. Sometimes she thought the best victories are quiet. That year, her company grew faster than ever before. But it wasn't just because of profits or strategy. It was because people believed in what she stood for. Clients and investors admired her courage. Employees were proud to represent her brand. And young women across the country saw her as proof that strength doesn't always have to roar. When she spoke at leadership conferences, she never mentioned the Whitakers by name. Instead, she told a story about dignity, about knowing your worth, and about never letting someone else's smallness define your value. Respect, she said once on stage, isn't given to you when you earn enough money. It's something you demand by showing who you are, even if it costs you everything. The crowd had gone silent. Then applause erupted. And somewhere, in the same city where she'd once walked out of a room full of laughter, her words echoed through the kind of halls that used to shut her out. In the end, Maya's story wasn't about revenge or money. It was about something far bigger: self-respect, boundaries, and the quiet power of walking away. She didn't cancel that $5 billion deal out of spite. She canceled it because some things are worth more than money: integrity, equality, peace of mind. The world might remember her as the woman who cost a family billions, but those who truly understood her saw something else: a woman who showed what grace under pressure really looks like. And as the headlines faded and the next corporate scandal took over, her lesson remained timeless: a soft, powerful truth whispered into boardrooms, business schools, and hearts everywhere. Never let anyone make you feel small, especially in a room you built your way into. That, Maya knew, was her legacy. Not the billions she earned, not the headlines she made, but the standard she set for how to be respected without having to demand it. Because sometimes the loudest statement isn't a speech or a fight. It's the sound of your heels walking away, and the world realizing too late what they just lost.